Jennifer Chiaverini, an acclaimed author known for historical fiction, is with us today. She graduated from the University of Notre Dame and the University of Chicago and eventually transitioned from freelance writing to full-time fiction. Her notable works include Mrs. Lincoln's Dressmaker, a bestseller exploring the Civil War era, Resistance Women, a World War II novel inspired by true events, and for our purposes here today, the Elm Creek Quilt series, celebrated for its insights into quilting and friendships. Her themes and style seem to be meticulously researched fiction with vivid historical settings, and her new book, The Museum of Lost Quilts, will be published on April 30th, and in support of that, she'll be visiting this very library here in Cedarburg, Wisconsin on May 1st at 6:30 p.m., and we're very excited about that. So around the horn, I'd like to introduce Library Director Linda Eastwood, who is here today to keep us all in line. And we have Melissa with a last name that I'm going to let her say.
Ralsted.
Thank you.
If you can get Chiaverini, you can get Ralsted, for God's sake. God.
She is with our local Museum of Quilts and Fiber Arts. What do you do over there, Melissa? What's your main title?
I am the museum's executive director.
So there's that. So you're actually like completely utterly in charge, and that's wonderful. So that's
a little bit of everything. Yeah.
A little bit of everything, absolutely.
Melissa is the force of nature, for God's sake. You got to know that.
There we are. And of course, there's Jack Henke, who I do radio with once a week here on this very network. And locally, most people say, "Are you guys still doing that?" So there's Jack. And of course, our guest of honor, Jennifer. And welcome to our virtual table.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Take it away, everybody.
Okay, so again, welcome, Jennifer. So happy to have you here, and really looking forward to May 1st. We made registration for 100, and it's already filled. So,
oh goodness,
your reputation clearly, precedes you because it filled up in record time. Wow. So, in fact, we'll probably be having to turn away people, sadly, but or they can stand somewhere. But we'll figure it out.
Standing room only. Good, we'll do it.
We're used to flying by the seat of our pants.
Well, I'm sorry.
We're used to flying by the seat of our pants here, so we'll make it all work. So,
okay,
but people are very excited to have you come.
That's lovely. I'm excited to come.
Good. And this week happens to be National Library Week. So we're, thrilled to interview this week because I know you happen to have an affection for libraries.
I do.
Yes. So my first question is sort of what is your, affinity for libraries like? How did it start? And what got you traveling into the library door, and how did that affect you to grow up and be a writer?
Well, it was my local branch library where I was growing up in Michigan was absolutely essential to my development as a reader and a writer. Every Saturday, my mom would take me to the library. I learned to read at a very early age. And so it was challenging to find books that were interesting enough to keep my attention with reading, with the appropriate reading level, but were also suitable material wise. I wasn't ready to be reading young adult books, even, I was in kindergarten or, younger. So I relied so much upon the children's librarians there to recommend books that were just right for me at that age and at that stage of my reading development. And my mom would take me every Saturday and I would check out this big stack of books and take them home, devour them all in a week. And then one of the great things that my mom did, in addition to reading to me since I was, an infant, when I became a reader on my own, she would always listen to me as I told her about the books that I read, the library books that I read. And that really helped me get an understanding of how novels were created, how stories were created, what I liked about what a particular author did, what fascinated me, maybe didn't strike so many chords with me as a reader. And so it really gave me a good lesson early on on what made a story work. And so, of course, I always, my love for libraries continued throughout my education as I grew up. And my first real job when I was in high school was a part-time job working at, by this time we had moved to California. So it was a job as a page in our city library. And I did, I did the shelving of the books. I retrieved the microfiche. I handled all the calls to the reference desk. I also worked in the AV department. So there was a lot of checking in and checking out and shelving of VHS cassettes, which were just the real new thing, that our library had this great collection of VHS. And part of what was so formative in my development as a writer and also as a person was all of the wonderful people I worked with at the library. So it wasn't just the materials that were available. There was the librarians, the library assistants, all of the people there of all different ages, all kinds of different walks of life, and the conversations we would have, the books and the music that they would recommend to me. It was working in the library was a very important formative experience for me as a high school student, and it continued on through college. And now libraries are still a wonderful resource for me for reading for enjoyment and also for research materials. We have fantastic libraries here in the Madison area. I rely upon all the Dane County South Central Library, South Central Wisconsin Library System archives. The Wisconsin Historical Society Library is incredibly important for my historical novel research. And so both whether I'm reading to do research for a new novel or reading for just pure edification and entertainment, my libraries remain so crucial to me, and I'm just grateful that they are there.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, you could be our ambassador for sure. That's
I'll take the title. I'll add that to my job description.
And Jennifer, you're a woman after my own heart. My first job in high school was a library page as well. And I am still friends. I am still friends with some. So in terms of those connections that you make, yep, I'm still friends with some of the staff, even though they've since retired. It's been a while. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how instrumental that was in, forming you as a person, forming me as a person, but a very similar sort of path. I just am not an author and make no claims to be.
That's all right.
Well, we do have an author in our midst. Jack does some writing himself.
Yes, and I'm always fascinated with someone who's so as prolific as you are, Jennifer. That's just I look at your list and it's unbelievable. Do you have?
Well, I've been at it for a while. They add up over the years.
You're a young'un, but
but thank you.
Do you have a daily writing practice that you follow? And if you do, when did you start doing it?
Well, my first novel came out it came out 25 years ago this month. So I have been at it for a while. It depends what state of the writing process I'm in. If I am writing the first draft of a new book, I try to write 1,000 words a day. And sometimes that will take 4 hours. Sometimes it will take 10. Sometimes I won't reach that goal. It depends on the day and how things are going. So, but I get up in the morning, I have my breakfast, check email, get some exercise, and then I just get to it. In the room where you see me now, I have a nice comfortable desk and lots of research references to pull from. But I'm, my writing routine has changed as I've gone through various life stages. When my children were very young, I couldn't write all day. I raised my boys, and then when my husband came home from work, he would take over and I would fit my writing into just the evening. And now that they're both off, one son is out of college, one is still a student in college. Now I have more time to write whatever time during the day suits me best.
What was it like? You were a freelance writer, and then you made the leap into full-time writer novelist. Was there a moment when you said, "This is it"?
No, I'm not exactly sure where that came from, but I wasn't ever a freelance writer.
It came from that extremely reliable thing called the internet.
I was never a freelance writer. What I did when I was writing the first drafts of my what became my first novel, I was teaching at Penn State in State College, Pennsylvania. So I was teaching for the English department. I had a part-time adjunct faculty position. So I was teaching writing, and then when I wasn't teaching or meeting with students or grading papers, I would work on my first novel. So yeah, I didn't mention I'd also lived in Pennsylvania. I've moved around a lot. Wherever I've gone, though, I've found a great library or two. So I have written some shorter pieces for a variety of publications, but almost all of that was after I became a novelist. So yeah, well, I was teaching and I was writing, and I think even I mentioned how working in a library helped my development as a writer. Teaching writing to college students also helped my development, because you have to, before if you have to explain something to someone else, if you have to explain a process to someone else, you really have to understand it thoroughly. And so there was no flying by the seat of my pants there. I had to be able to, understand, okay, well, if I'm telling the student something isn't working with this paragraph, I really need to understand why. So, and I can't just say, nah, I don't like it. I have to explain why it's not working and how maybe what techniques and strategies they can use to improve it. So by trying to help others improve their writing, it really was a process of learning for myself.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let's take a note here, guys. The internet was wrong about something on April 10th. Okay.
What? That's never.
But Jennifer, you made me think of. There's a quote: "If you ever really want to learn something, try teaching it. That's the best way to learn something." So that's right on. Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I have a lot of teachers in my family, and I really have never liked that saying, those who do can, those who can't teach. I've always disagreed with that. My experience has always been those who can do, those who can very well teach. That's what I thought. So in addition to loving librarians, I also love teachers. So. My mom was a teacher, and that's probably why she understood how important it was to read to me and to my siblings when we were, from a very early age. She understood how important that was.
Jennifer, I run the writers group here once a month, and they'll kill me if I don't ask you this question, because it's something that they obsess with.
Well, then you better ask.
I don't want to get in trouble with that bunch.
No.
And it's a simple question, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Plotter or pantser?
Oh, well, I like to try to blend the two strategies of working really with a structured outline of a plot and also making up it as I go. I do, with my historical fiction, it is very important for me to know what the major historical events were and when they happened and what my characters would have been experiencing and what influences there would have been at a particular setting. So I can't wing it too much if I want the books to be historically accurate.
Sure.
But at the same time, when I make a loose outline, not a formal outline, more of a list, I set up a timeline so that I get my historical events in the correct order. But then I don't have a formal outline like we learned in school. I just say, okay, chapter 1, and then I say what the dates for that chapter will be, what historical events need to happen. And then I write maybe a paragraph or a few sentences about what character development, what plot development needs to happen in that section. But I don't keep it too rigid. I've always found that it gives me a good framework to work with, but it needs to be flexible, because the process of writing, that's really when I discover what the story needs to be. So I will never sacrifice storytelling for the sake of my plan. The plan needs to be flexible and adapt, and yet I need it as a framework to put the story upon.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm off the hook.
Jennifer, I've got a question for you too, if I can. I mean, since obviously my interest is on the quilts and fiber art side of it, so which comes first, the quilts or the story? Are you using, especially with like the Museum of Lost Quilts, are you inspired by certain patterns? I know you create your own as well, but how do you weave that in?
I've always wanted to be a writer, as from the time I learned how to read. So I'm a writer first, and I became a quilter later. So I am a writer who quilts, not a quilter who. I see that my sound is going out. Can you still hear me?
We can. Yeah, you're a little choppy, but we're doing okay.
All right. So I always wanted to be a writer. That was always the dream when I grew up. I wanted to share stories with other people the way my favorite authors had shared their stories with me. And I came to quilting later. And when you are like, when I was a newlywed, I wanted to have a beautiful heirloom wedding quilt to celebrate occasion. But, like I said, I was a part-time adjunct faculty member, and my husband was in graduate school. So we couldn't afford to buy the genuine article. So, and I didn't have any relatives who quilted that I knew of. So I realized that if I wanted this heirloom wet quilt, I would need to make one myself. So I got a booklet called Teach Yourself How to Quilt, and I bought some fabrics and needles and scissors and everything else that said I were required materials. And I followed the step-by-step instructions to make my first sampler. So I fell more in love with quilting, and I learned new techniques and found new patterns. And then I really wanted to launch I wanted to start fulfilling this dream of writing a novel. And so at the time when I was just starting out, a young writer, the advice that I received from everybody was write what you know. Mm-hmm. And since I was a quilter and I know about the quilting community and how warm and encouraging the quilting community is, and I had also just was so entranced by all the evocative quilt block pattern names and all of the folklore surrounding quilting, that I decided to take the advice and write what I know. And so I wrote my first novel about quilters and about, this book was The Quilter's Apprentice, and it came out 25 years ago this month. It was really the story of an experienced quilter passing along her knowledge to a young apprentice quilter who was just getting started and wanting to learn. And as they passed on these quilting lessons, a friendship developed, and they decided to launch a new business, a quilter's retreat in central Pennsylvania, which is where I was living when I wrote the first book. And that is why this series isn't set in Wisconsin, because I was living in Pennsylvania when I wrote the first book. I didn't sell the book until after I had moved to Wisconsin. So, I have lived in Wisconsin much longer than I lived in Pennsylvania, but because that's where the first book was, that's where the series is set, except for those where my characters travel somewhere else. So the characters and the story always come first for me. It's not that I found a quilt and decided to write a story about it. Everything springs from the characters, the Elm Creek quilters and their friends, and sometimes their rivals. It's not all friendship. There are some rivalries, and there are some antagonists in these stories as well. But really the quilts come from the characters. So Sylvia might make a particular quilt, and that's why that's in the book. And Summer will make another kind of quilt in a completely different style. So it's not the quilts that I would necessarily make as a quilter, but it's what these characters would make. And so the quilts find their way into the story that way.
I always loved the quilting community. My favorite, a volunteer that always said she was new to an area and she found a guild and she's like, yep, I found my people.
Oh, wonderful.
But it's very much, I mean, that community, it's one of the things I love about the books, is you capture that kind of sense of community that you get within that larger quilting world.
Good. Well, I'm glad, because that's something I've heard from other readers too, that especially when I announced that the Museum of Lost Quilts was coming out, readers would tell me that they missed their friends, and they used the word community. I missed that community. And then I thought, well, gosh, I should have done this earlier. If I had known, if I had known how eager readers were for more stories about Elm Creek Manor, the place they love to visit in their imagination, and then the circle of quilters that they think of as their friends, I would have done it sooner, but I'm doing it now. So I hope that's good. I hope readers are happy with that.
How tough was it to launch your first book, or how, as a first-time writer or novelist, what did you do to get your first book out there, or who did you reach out to, or how did you start?
Well, keep in mind that this is outdated information now, because I sold my book in 1997. So what worked for me then is very, very different from what works for aspiring authors now, because, we did not have Google there were some websites, but not very many. There was no social media. So it's a very different process now. I had been working on my first novel, and I finished it. I had a draft, and I joined an internet writing workshop, and we had a listserv. That's how old this was. And I was in the novels group. And for the kids out there, ask your grandparents what listserv is. They'll be able to tell you. So we would send each other chapters, and we could critique them. And a woman on the list named Jody Ewing, she read my books and my chapters and was helping me critique them and revise them. And she told me that she really loved them and wondered if I wouldn't mind if she recommended my book to an editor she knew. Wow. And so I'm not entirely insane. I said, absolutely, please do. So I wrote a cover letter. And, all this time I had been sending it out to agents and getting rejections. I had been sending them to publishers and getting rejections. So this seemed like my in. I knew someone who had connection. And so Jody sent it to Lori Chittenden at Simon & Schuster, which is my first publisher. And her assistant contacted me and asked for the whole book, because I just sent in a chapter. And so I very quickly, and we still did out drafts and shipped actual paper manuscripts back in the day. And so I sent that off, and then I moved to Wisconsin. And then about a month after I moved to Wisconsin, the editor herself phoned me and made an offer for the manuscript. Now, even then, at Simon & Schuster, you were not supposed to be able to get a book published unless you had an agent. But Lori fell in love with the story, and she saw that it had a potential to really mean a lot to other readers. And so she took a chance on a young, new, never published, unagented author. And of course, this started everything with The Quilter's Apprentice. And so sometime later, of course, right away, I thanked Jody for making that connection for me. And then sometime later, I said, how did you meet Lori? Anyway, were you college roommates? Were you neighbors? And it turned out that she knew my new editor, because she had submitted a manuscript to her on someone else's behalf, and Lori had passed on that manuscript, and that was it. That's their connection. So here I thought I had the inside track, and it was not, wasn't really like that at all. It was just that a fellow aspiring writer liked my work so much that she wanted to see it in print. So she advocated for me. And it was an incredible act of kindness that shouldn't have worked. And yet it did. And so I'm always going to be grateful to Jody for taking this, and of course, and Lori for taking a chance on my book. It would have been a very different story not for those, for those two women being willing to, take a look at me, even though I didn't have an agent, and to take a chance on something that they thought had some promise.
Amazing. Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
There are nice people in the world, and smart.
There are.
And you repaid Jody by merely writing over 30 novels. I mean, my goodness.
Well, I dedicated books to her too. I dedicated books to her.
I think you've held up your end of the bargain. That's pretty cool.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, it's really, I don't know if it would have happened. I don't know if it would have happened some other way, but it certainly wouldn't have happened that soon.
Right. Right. Who are some of the authors whom you enjoy reading, Jennifer?
Oh, well, my favorite author is Jane Austen, but she hasn't been doing anything new lately. I don't know what's so, but you could probably tell that I love historical fiction. I am a voracious reader. It's a habit I picked up on all those library visits all those many years ago. And some of my favorite historical fiction authors are Mary Doria Russell. In fact, hold on. One of my favorite books, you can see I'm in a room full of books. One of my favorite books is The Women of the Copper Country by Mary Doria Russell. You can probably pick it up at the Cedar Public Library or at your favorite local independent bookstore, like Boswell Books, who will be at my event in Cedarburg. This is a wonderful book. It's set in the Midwest. It's set in Upper Michigan, and it focuses on a real woman who is known as Big Annie, who helped lead a copper miners strike. She was named Big Annie because she was over 6 feet tall. She was married to a copper miner and just absolutely horrified and angered by all the lax working conditions, the standards that allowed so many copper miners to be severely injured or killed. So she took it upon herself to lead this strike, which could have been very devastating for her personally and for her community, but she stuck with it. So it's a wonderful story. So read it as soon as you can. It's a fantastic book. And then, another book that I have recently read, it's a little bit, it came out a few years ago, but I love it. Still Life by Sarah Winman. It is a wonderful, wonderful story of British expatriates in Italy, and also all the wonderful people they meet in this Italian community. I read it when I was going to be visiting Italy, and it's just a wonderful story. I just haven't forgotten ever since I read it, and I'm planning to reread it soon. The historical novel that I'm reading right now that I absolutely love, and it isn't here because it's in the other room where I'm still reading it, is James by Percival Everett. It just came out. It is absolutely wonderful. You should pick this one too. It's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but from the perspective of James. Jim. It's a marvelous book. Like all of Percival Everett's book, it's full of beautiful, rich language, satire, humor, just wonderful prose and very, very thought-provoking characters and storytelling. It's just wonderful. So those are three that I'm recommending very highly right now. A book I'm looking forward to reading, but I haven't picked up yet, is Becoming Madam's Secretary by Stephanie Dray. That is also a newly published book that I don't have yet, but I am planning to pick up on my book tour. I'm going to pick that up from an independent bookseller. I love to support them as much as I love to support libraries. So that's 4 for you.
I just got a donation recently to pick up a bunch of historical fiction for the library. So I've been taking copious notes as you've been talking.
Good.
So thank you.
Oh, and Mary Doria Russell writes lots of historical fiction. It's all wonderful. So just add that to your stack. I was up for the library.
Done deal.
I just think the most interesting part of writing historical fiction must be doing the research and the things you learn and places you go to do your research. I'm sure that's just what makes it so exciting. And then putting that in.
Yeah, it's when I started out, I told you the story or the advice I was given to write what you know, and that's what drew me into writing the books about quilting and quilters. But now I'm, because I guess I picked up everything I knew. So now when I approach historical fiction, I use a different motto. It's write what I want to learn about. If I discover a historical figure or a historical event that I, read about in passing, and it intrigues me and really captivates my imagination, and I want to learn more, then I dive into doing all the historical research. And then if I discover this is an amazing person, this is an amazing historical event, why didn't we learn about this in history class? Then that's usually a sign to me that, well, if I'm fascinated by this idea, other readers probably would be too. And I like to learn more and turn it into a novel, which I then share with other historical fiction buffs like myself.
I wish you would get passionate about something, Jennifer. It's really a shame that you just don't care about reading, writing, libraries, anything. Same old, same old. Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm very blasé about life.
So Jennifer, in your travels, have you been through Cedarburg before? Will this be your first visit?
Oh boy, I know I've been in the Milwaukee area and some of the northern suburbs before, and I've done so many wonderful events with Boswell Books and Harry Schwartz when it was in its previous incarnation. They've been so incredibly supportive of my work, as they are with all Wisconsin authors. So I visited a number of libraries in partnership with Boswell Books. Yeah. If I don't think I've been to Cedarburg. I know I've been to the Quilt Museum. I've definitely
which is in Cedarburg.
You've been in Cedarburg.
We're just not downtown, but we are in the city limits. Just barely.
But I don't know. Maybe we did a Boswell event back in the day at there, because I know I've done an event right in your very early years, right when you were first opening. So, not Melissa, maybe we're overdue. I don't know for a follow-up.
I would absolutely love that. It'd be great. I even still have the poster from the event that you did.
Oh, do you really? Oh, good. Okay, so there is proof. You have receipts.
Yes, there is. There absolutely. I actually, you know what?
That's so fun. Yeah, let's figure out when that was. When was that?
Really, truly, I actually do.
Oh gosh. And I signed it. That's it.
You did. You signed it. So right. I don't have a year though, but it was for the Giving.
When did I date the signature? I thought I saw.
You did 11/1/12. So yeah, that would have been.
Wow, that's a long time ago.
Well, and it would have been about a year after the museum, just a year after the museum opened. So
yes.
You're right. It was very early.
We might need to do something about that. We might need to do something about Melissa. We'll have to talk.
Yeah, let's chat.
People can call my people. Pardon?
The page connection between the two of you.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's
the
page.
Exactly, that page connection.
The library page reunion in this year. No pressure, though, Melissa. No pressure.
Well, cool. This is great. Yeah.
Next year, I do have another Elm Creek Quilts novel coming out next year, so we'll have to see what we can do.
Building bridges here on CPL Radio. I love it. This is working out well.
Yeah,
So,
you know what?
Fantastic.
This is like the quilt community and the book community and the library network. We just
I love it.
we
That's
force
what we do.
connection.
Excellent.
That's what we do.
Well, I'd like to remind everyone that May 1st is coming soon at 6:30 p.m. We are going to fill this place.
That's great.
And it's pretty exciting and fascinating to hear you talk and inspiring people. I expect checkouts to spike on everything you're talking about here. And
Let's
obviously,
hope so.
yeah, without a doubt. If anybody else has anything else to add, fire away. Otherwise, we will.
I have a quick question. Do men read your books? Does your husband?
They do. My husband definitely does. My husband does. My sons do. And my eldest son, Nick, he's an actor. And so he is great to talk to about ideas and, character development and all that kind of thing. And then my younger son, Michael, he's an aspiring opera. He's a classical musician. He is really good at finding errors in books. So he actually helps me with the copy editing and the reading of the galley proofs. And then my husband has always been my first reader all the way back when I first started reading The Quilter's Apprentice back in the day. And yes, men do read my books. They come to my book signings. I hear from online. Yes, I'm sure my audience is, from what I see at a book signing, most of my readers are women, but yes, there are plenty of men who read books too. There are plenty of men who quilt.
Yep.
Let's not forget that.
Men do quilt.
Yes.
Men
come on.
who quilt. We must avoid stereotyping quilters here. There are people there are so many people who are drawn to quilting. Men, women, all genders, all races, all socioeconomic groups. Quilting is really is a wonderful art form that is accessible to so many in a way that possibly other art forms are not. And another thing that I love about quilting, it's very democratic. You can jump in, you can work with, you can find a group, you can find lessons online, you can find tips in your books at your library, which is something I did when I was starting out quite a bit. And it's such a wonderful, warm, accessible art form that is such a wonderful creative outlet for so many people from so many different walks of life. And that is part of its enormous appeal for me, is that, this quilters come together wherever they start, wherever their starting point is, they can find this community amongst other quilters. And it's something that I found really inspiring when I was becoming a quilter myself. And it's something that gives me a lot of hope in humanity today, when I could see how it brings people together.
Awesome.
Just another blasé reaction again.
I know. I should have I bet you wished I had had more caffeine before I got here. Maybe have a little more energy. A little more energy. I'll try better next time.
If you're looking for those how-to quilt books, what's that, Linda, about the 700s upstairs? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so come on down, get started, I'm just selfish. I get cold. I need to get into quilting because, February in Wisconsin, that's it. So.
And that's what... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
I was just going to say,
professional.
You go ahead, Melissa.
It's not a real quilt until somebody slept under it.
There we go. Well, that part I got down. That part I can do with the best of them.
Even if you're a beginning quilter, and you shouldn't be, but if you're embarrassed by your mistakes and you wish I would have done it differently, I would have, you don't need to have any of that self-doubt and self-critique, because your quilt can still keep somebody warm on cold Wisconsin February night. And that's fantastic. Maybe you see all the things you would have done differently, but that quilt is still keeping somebody warm. So
I like that. Absolutely. I've got cats, so that'll work really well. Well, that's fantastic. This was exciting, and what a pleasure to meet you. And I hope to meet you in person, of course, beginning of May 1st, 6:30 p.m., Cedarburg Public Library. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I can't wait to see the library. It's going to be a great week.
We'll get you the tour. All right. See you soon. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And just give us a call here at the library if you have any questions about the event coming up. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thanks.